Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Terran Pride, watching through the tactical display as her 12-ship diplomatic fleet materialized in the outer system of Nexus Prime. Around her, the angular bulk of humanity's finest warships hung in the void like metallic Predator's hull plating scarred from atmospheric testing, missile pods bristling from every available hardpoint, and point defense turrets tracking potential threats with mechanical precision. Admiral, called Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communications station, were receiving multiple scanning beams. The locals seem interested in our ships. Chen allowed herself a thin smile. I imagine they are. Status of the fleet? All ships reporting. Ready, ma'am. The Righteous Fury and Sword of Terra are maintaining overwatch positions, and our escort destroyers have spread into defensive formation. Through the viewports, the capital world of the Galactic Concordat gleamed like a jewel against the star. Field, orbital stations hung in perfect geometric arrangements, their crystalline structures catching and refracting the system's twin suns into prismatic displays of light. It was beautiful land, utterly alien to human sensibilities. Incoming transmission, Admiral Torres reported. It's the Nexus Prime Orbital Control. On screen, the holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a tall, willowy figure with pale blue skin and 4 arms. The Althari controller wore flowing robes that seemed to move independently of any breeze, and their large, multifaceted eyes examined the human ships with barely concealed curiosity. Welcome vessels of the Terran species, the controller said, their voice carrying musical undertones that the translation software rendered as formal politeness. I am HumanityFYeah of Nexus Control. Your unique ship designs have certainly attracted attention. Chen stepped forward. Thank you, Harmonizer. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the Terran Diplomatic Fleet. We're honored to be here. Indeed, you are cleared to approach Docking Station Tertiary 7. Please maintain standard approach vectors and, Yelthera paused, consulting what appeared to be a floating display of light. Forgive me, Admiral, but our sensors are detecting numerous weapon signatures on your vessels. Surely these are ceremonial displays. Your actual combat vessels must be elsewhere in your fleet. These are our combat vessels. Harmonizer, Chen replied evenly, and those weapons are quite functional. A long silence followed. Chen could see Yelthera's 4 eyes blinking in what she'd learned was an Althari expression of confusion. I see. Well, please proceed to your assigned berth. The Concordat Council eagerly awaits your arrival. The transmission ended, and Chen turned to find her bridge crew exchanging glances. Chief Tactical Officer, Commander James Park, stepped closer, his voice low. Admiral, did that sound condescending to you? Just wait until they get a closer look. At U.S. Commander, I have a feeling we're in for an interesting reception. 3 hours later, Admiral Chen stood in the Grand Assembly Chamber of the Concordat Council, a vast amphitheater carved from what appeared to be a single massive crystal. Representatives from dozens of species filled the tiered seating beings of light and shadow, crystalline entities that chimed when they moved, and elegant humanoids whose grace made even their simplest gestures appear choreographed. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed detailed scans of the human fleet. Chen watched as the assembled delegates examined her ships with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely suppressed amusement. Fascinating construction techniques, mused Warsinger Vestalon, the Althari military representative whose silver skin seemed to ripple with internal light. Such ... robust design philosophy. Though I confess, the aesthetic choices are quite puzzling. The Vex delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a roughly humanoid framework, pulsed with colors that Chen's briefing materials had indicated suggested intellectual superiority. The projectile weapons are particularly antiquated. Zephyr of Infinite Calculations noted, their voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Kinetic warheads, chemical explosives. Surely these are ceremonial relics from your pre-spaceflight era. Chen felt the familiar tightness in her jaw that came with being underestimated. Those weapons are standard issue for our fleet. Honored delegates. They've served us well in various conflicts. Warsinger Vestalon's tone carried the musical equivalent of polite confusion. Among your own species, how ... primitive. No wonder your military doctrine appears so crude. A ripple of what Chen could only interpret as laughter passed through the assembled delegates. The crystalline shard singers chimed in harmonic amusement, while several of the gaseous nebula dancers swirled in patterns that her briefing materials identified as perhaps suggested the elderly keeper Zoltar of the Archive Collective. His multiple tentacles writhing thoughtfully, we could demonstrate proper military engagement for our new friends. A learning experience, as it were. An excellent suggestion. Warsinger Vestalon agreed. Admiral Chen, would you care to observe a standard Concordat fleet exercise? It might illuminate the more refined approaches to interstellar warfare. Chen smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. We would be honored to observe, Warsinger. I'm sure it will be quite educational. We have a minor trade dispute between the Keth hegemony and the spiral coalition that requires military arbitration. Your people may observe from a safe distance, while our fleets demonstrate proper combat protocols. As the delegates began filing out of the chamber, Chen caught fragments of conversation that her translation implants rendered with uncomfortable clarity. Did you see those weapon configurations? Like something from the barbaric ages. Armor plating instead of proper energy shields. How do they even achieve efficient propulsion with all that mass? I heard their ships don't even have quantum harmonizers. They navigate using pure mathematics. Commander. Park appeared at her shoulder as they walked toward the transport platforms. Admiral, with respect, I'm getting the impression they think we're some kind of backwater savages. That's exactly what they think. James Chen replied quietly. The question is whether that's going to work for us or against us. As they boarded the elegant Althari transport that would carry them to the fleet observation platform, Chen gazed back at the docking station where the human ships waited. Compared to the graceful curves and crystalline beauty of the Concordat vessels, her fleet looked like a collection of weapon-studded asteroids, but those primitive ships had kept humanity alive through 3 centuries of increasingly desperate warfare. They'd been forged in the fires of necessity, built by people who understood that, in real combat, pretty got you killed. The Concordat was about to show them their idea of civilized warfare. Chen had a feeling that humanity's definition of the word was going to be somewhat different. The transport lifted away from Nexus Prime, carrying them toward what the aliens called a demonstration of proper military engagement. Admiral Sarah Chen settled back in her seat and wondered how long it would take before someone in this galaxy needed to learn the difference between warfare as art and warfare as survival. She suspected they'd find out sooner than anyone expected. Captain Marcus Rodriguez had seen his share of battles, from the Titan Rebellion to the bloody campaigns in the outer colonies. But nothing had prepared him for the spectacle unfolding before the Indomitable. Jesus Christ, muttered Tactical. Officer Lieutenant Kim Sato, her fingers dancing across her console as she recorded every detail of the engagement. Are they actually following choreographed patterns? The military demonstration between the Keth hegemony and Spiral Coalition played out like a deadly ballet in the space around Nexus Prime's 4th moon. 2 fleets of elegant vessels, the Keth ships resembling massive flower petals of blue-white energy, the Coalition craft flowing like liquid mercury, engaged in what the Concordat called proper warfare. Rodriguez watched through his tactical display as streams of coherent energy lanced between the fleets in precise, measured intervals. Each shot was a work of art, brilliant cascades of plasma that painted the void in shades of violet and gold. When the beams struck their targets, the ship's shields flared in response, creating elaborate light shows that drew appreciative comments from the Concordat observers. Captain, Call Communications Specialist Petty Officer Jensen, we're receiving a running commentary from Warsinger Vestalon there, critiquing the combat techniques, put it through the speakers. The Althari's musical voice filled the bridge. Observe the exquisite formation work of the Spiral Coalition's 3rd wing. Notice how they maintain perfect geometric harmony while executing the ascending Phoenix maneuver. Absolutely magnificent. And there the Keth commander responds with the classical starburst formation. Such adherence to traditional forms. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his XO, Commander Lisa Hayes. They're treating this like some kind of art competition. Sir, Lieutenant Sato called out, her voice tight with disbelief, I've been analyzing their engagement patterns. The firing solutions are completely predictable. They're following predetermined targeting sequences. On the display, a Keth vessels. Shields flared as it absorbed a perfectly calculated plasma burst. The ship immediately began a graceful withdrawal maneuver, its energy signature dimming to indicate critical damage. Several coalition ships peeled off to allow the wounded vessel to retreat with honor. Standard engagement. Protocol achieved, Warsinger-Vestalon announced proudly. The coalition forces have demonstrated superior tactical artistry. The Keith graciously acknowledged defeat in the disputed trade route. Combat concluded with minimal loss of life and maximum aesthetic achievement. Rodriguez felt his jaw clench. In 6 hours of combat, exactly 3 crew members had died, all from what appeared to be accidental shield failures. The rest of both fleets remained perfectly intact. "That wasn't a battle," Commander Hayes said quietly. "That was a dance recital with weapons." "A very polite dance recital," Rodriguez replied. "Lieutenant Sato, what would have happened if we'd engaged either of those fleets using standard Terran doctrine?" Sato's fingers flew over her console, running combat simulations. "Using our current loadout, we'd have targeted their command and control centers first, disrupted their communications, then focused fire on their primary weapon systems. Estimated engagement time, 12 minutes. Projected casualties, ... double quotes, she paused, swallowing hard. "Significant, sir. And if they tried those pretty formations against us, their ships would be sitting ducks. Those geometric patterns they're so proud of, they're tactically disastrous. No overlapping fields of fire, predictable movement vectors, and they seem to actively avoid targeting anything vital." Rodriguez nodded grimly. Admiral Chen had warned him that galactic warfare might be different from human standards, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. These aliens had somehow turned combat into performance art. "Sir," Jensen called out, "Admiral Chen is requesting a full tactical report on our observations. Tell the Admiral we'll have a comprehensive analysis ready within the hour. And Jensen, include a note that we might want to keep our actual combat capabilities to ourselves for now." As the alien fleets began their ceremonial post-battle rituals, which apparently involved a lot of bowing, light displays, and what appeared to be the exchange of poetry, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just been handed a significant advantage. Deep in the galactic core, where ancient stars burned with the fury of creation itself, something that had slumbered for 10,000 years began to stir. Dr. Elena Vasquez was reviewing xenoarchaeological reports in her cramped office, aboard the Human Research Station Endeavour, when the first deep space monitoring alerts began cascading across her screens. As humanity's leading expert on precursor civilizations, she'd been granted access to the Concordat's most sensitive archaeological databases, a privilege that was about to become humanity's greatest nightmare. Dr. Vasquez. Her assistant, Dr. Chen Wei, burst through the office door with unusual urgency. "The deep core monitoring stations are detecting massive energy signatures. We're talking stellar-level power outputs, but the signatures don't match any known technology." Elena's blood went cold. She'd spent the last 3 years studying fragments of an ancient race the Concordat called the Harvesters, beings who had supposedly consumed entire star systems before mysteriously vanishing millennia ago. The energy signatures Chen was describing matched theoretical projections she'd developed from archaeological evidence. "Show me the data," she said, her voice steady despite the growing dread in her stomach. The holographic display that materialized above her desk showed a 3-dimensional map of the galactic core. Dozens of red markers pulsed in the dense star fields, each one representing an energy signature that defied conventional understanding. "They're moving," Chen whispered. "Elena, whatever these things are, they're moving toward inhabited systems." Hands flew over her console, accessing the classified precursor archives. Ancient texts, fragmentary records, and archaeological evidence painted a picture that made her wish she'd chosen a different career path. "Get me a priority channel to Admiral Chen immediately," she ordered, "and send a copy of all this data. To Nexus Prime, the Concordat needs to know what's coming." 12 hours later, Elena stood before the assembled Concordat Council, watching as the galaxy's greatest military minds tried to process information that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. "Impossible," Warsinger declared, their silver skin rippling with agitation. "The Harvesters were destroyed eons ago. This must be some natural phenomenon." The energy signatures are artificial, Alina insisted. And they're not just moving randomly, they're coordinating. This is organized, purposeful movement toward inhabited systems. Zephyr-Vin finite calculations pulsed with skeptical colors. Even if these are artificial constructs, surely they would be vulnerable to standard engagement protocols. No technology, however ancient, could withstand the combined might of the Concordat fleets. Alina pulled up holographic reconstructions based on archaeological evidence. The assembled delegates fell silent as massive angular vessels filled the chamber ships that looked more like geometric nightmares than anything designed by sentient beings. According to the records, the harvesters don't engage in combat the way we understand it, Alina explained. They don't follow rules. They don't take prisoners. They consume everything: ships, stations, entire planets. Their only goal is the complete absorption of all matter and energy they encounter. Preposterous, scoffed Keeper Zoltar. All civilized beings understand the protocols of warfare. There are standards, agreements, codes of conduct that have governed galactic conflicts for millennia. The harvesters aren't civilized beings, Alina said quietly. They're something else entirely. Something that views us all as nothing more than resources to be consumed. Before anyone could respond, urgent alerts began sounding throughout the chamber. A messenger rushed in, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with panic. The Fourth Fleet has engaged unknown vessels at the Kepler 442 system. They're requesting immediate reinforcements. Admiral Siltar says the enemy isn't responding to standard challenge protocols. Warsinger Vestalon rose, their form radiating confidence. Assemble the Grand Fleet. We shall demonstrate to these ancient relics what modern warfare can achieve. Ready, the Symphony of Destruction wheel, settle this with proper military artistry. Alina watched as the greatest naval commanders in the galaxy prepared for battle. Using tactics that had been refined over thousands of years of civilized warfare. She thought about the human fleet, with their crude kinetic weapons and brutal boarding actions, waiting at the edge of the system for the first time since arriving at Nexus Prime. She wondered if the galaxy's laughter at human barbarism was about to turn into desperate pleas for help. The emergency session of the Concordat Council convened in chaos. Half the delegate seats stood empty, their occupants dead. Their fleets scattered radioactive debris drifting in the void where the 4th, 7th, and 9th fleets had made their stands. Admiral Chen stood before the surviving council members, her dress uniform pristine, despite having spent the last 48 hours coordinating humanity's response to the galaxy's desperate calls for aid. Around her, the elegant amphitheater showed scorch marks where emergency life support systems had overloaded during the evacuation from the outer systems. Warsinger, the Stellan, their silver skin now bearing dull patches of grief-dimmed light, spoke with none of their former musical confidants. Admiral Chen, the reports from our surviving commanders are difficult to comprehend. The harvesters ignore all protocols. They target life support systems directly. They coordinate their attacks with no regard for formation, integrity, or tactical artistry. They ram our ships, added the shaken voice of Zephyr Infinite Calculations, their energy form flickering weakly. When their vessels are damaged, they simply crash them into our hulls. No ceremony, no honor, no ... no sense. Chen had reviewed the tactical reports. The Concordat's response to the Harvester incursion had been exactly what Elena Vasquez had predicted: a masterclass in civilized warfare met by an enemy that had never heard of civilization. The result had been slaughter. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through 3 centuries of human warfare. My species requests permission to engage the Harvester threat. A shocked silence filled the chamber. Keeper Zoltar's tentacles writhed in what she recognized as distress. Admiral, with the greatest respect, if our most advanced fleets could not stand against these creatures, how could your forgive me, but your relatively primitive vessels hope to succeed? Chun's smile was sharp as a blade. Because we don't fight pretty wars. Within 6 hours, the human fleet was in motion. Not just the 12 diplomatic vessels, but every combat-capable ship humanity could muster: carriers, loaded with fighters, destroyers packed with enough firepower to crack moons, and the massive dreadnoughts that represented humanity's commitment to the principle that if something needed killing, you killed it thoroughly. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as they dropped out of hyperspace into what the Concordat had designated Engagement Zone 7. The tactical display immediately filled with contacts dozens of harvester vessels, their angular geometries defying any aesthetic sense. Moving through the shattered remnants of a Concordat defense fleet, "My God," whispered Commander Hayes. Their feeding the harvesters were systematically dismantling everything in the system-wrecked ships. Orbital platforms, even the rocky inner planets were being consumed by massive processing vessels that broke matter down to its component atoms. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," came the voice over the fleet communications channel. "Rules of engagement are simple. Kill everything that moves. No prisoners, no honor guards, no pretty formations. This is extermination warfare. Show them how humans fight." Rodriguez grinned for the first time in days. "All stations, battle stations. Tactical, I want firing solutions on everything in range. Communications, signal the fighter squadron's weapons free on launch." The human fleet fell on the harvesters like a pack of wolves. Fighter craft swarmed from the carriers in seemingly chaotic patterns, their pilots using tactics that made no sense to observers accustomed to formal wing formations. They dove between harvester vessels, launching volleys of nuclear-tipped missiles at point-blank range, before spiraling away through debris fields that would have shredded more cautious pilots. The destroyers opened up with everything they had: batteries sending tungsten slugs at significant fractions of light speed, while missile pods disgorged their entire payloads in concentrated barrages that turned sectors of space into expanding spheres of plasma and metal. But it was the boarding actions that truly shocked the Concordat observers. Rodriguez to Admiral Chen, the captain reported, as his ship closed with a massive harvester construct, "We're going to try something stupid." "Approved, Captain. Give 'em hell." The Indomitable rammed its armored prow directly into the harvesters' hull, punching through alien armor like a bullet through paper. Breach pods fired immediately, carrying marine assault teams directly into the enemy vessel's interior. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos led her squad through corridors that hurt to look at, surfaces that seemed to bend in impossible directions, filled with the mechanical sounds of an intelligence that viewed organic life as merely another resource to process. Contact Front called Corporal Jackson as the first. Harvester constructs rounded a corner, crystalline spider things the size of armored vehicles, moving with mechanical precision. Santos didn't hesitate. "Light 'em up." The narrow corridor filled with the roar of assault rifles, the whoosh of rocket-propelled grenades, and the distinctive crack hiss of plasma cutters being used as weapons. The harvesters, designed to process unresisting matter, had no protocols for dealing with bipedal mammals who shot back. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out. Human crews fought deck by deck through alien vessels, using tools and tactics that the harvesters' ancient programming had never encountered. Plasma torches meant for cutting bulkheads became weapons. Emergency air supplies became improvised explosives. Maintenance robots were reprogrammed to carry grenades into enemy engineering sections. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it was over, the harvester fleet was gone, not defeated in the elegant sense of Concordat warfare, but utterly annihilated. Destroyed so thoroughly that even their component atoms had been scattered by the violence of human weapons. Admiral Chen stood in the ruins of her flag bridge, her uniform torn and bloodied from the boarding action she'd personally led against. The Harvester command ship around her damage control teams worked to keep the Terran Pride operational despite having lost 30% of her hull plating. Admiral called her communications officer. "Message from Nexus Prime. Warsinger Vestalon is requesting immediate consultation on human military doctrine." Chen wiped blood from a cut on her forehead and smiled grimly. "Tell the Warsinger, we'll be happy to discuss our methods, but warn, the more classes aren't going to be nearly as polite as their demonstrations." The galaxy was about to learn that, sometimes, to save civilization, you had to be willing to abandon it entirely. The final confrontation came at the edge of the galactic core, where the ancient Harvester installation had slumbered for 10 millennia. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her rebuilt flagship, the Terran Vengeance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for humanity's most desperate gambit. Around her, the combined forces of 100 species moved in formations that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Elegant Althari cruisers flew wing to wing with scarred human destroyers. Crystalline Shardsinger vessels provided cover for battered Concordat carriers whose fighter bays had been retrofitted with human weapons. The entire galaxy had learned to fight dirty. "Status report," Chen called out. "All human vessels report." "Ready," Admiral replied, her new tactical officer, Commander Park. Transferred from the Righteous Fury after that ship had been vaporized during the siege of Alpha Centauri, Concordat allies are in position, though Warsinger Vestalan keeps. Requesting permission to maintain minimum aesthetic formation standards, Chen almost smiled. In the 3 months since humanity had entered the war, Vestalan had become an unlikely convert to human military doctrine. The proud Althari had watched their most beautiful vessels die in perfect formation, then learned to appreciate the ugly effectiveness of human tactics. "Tell the Warsinger that today, survival is our only aesthetic," Chen replied. The tactical display showed what they were facing. A construct the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that defied physical law and surrounded by a swarm of harvester vessels that numbered in the thousands. Intelligence reports suggested this was the central node, the controlling intelligence that had coordinated the galactic assault. Admiral called Dr. Vasquez from her position at the science station. Long-range sensors confirm the structure's function. It's not just a command center, it's a replication facility. If we don't stop it here, it'll spawn enough harvesters to consume half the galaxy. "Then we stop it here," Chen said simply. The battle began with the kind of elegant opening that the old Concordat would have appreciated: coordinated fleet movements and precise energy weapon barrages. But it was a feint designed to draw the harvesters into their standard defensive configurations. "All units execute Plan Barbarian," Chen ordered. What followed would have horrified military tacticians from the pre-war era. Human suicide bombers, their ships packed with antimatter charges, dove directly into harvester formations. Marine assault craft, launched from hidden positions among the asteroid fields, used their occupants' willingness to die for the mission to penetrate enemy defenses that assumed rational self-preservation. Captain Rodriguez, commanding the assault group tasked with breaching the central construct, led his ships in a ramming attack that punched through the installation's outer shell. As his vessel, the Indomitable II, died around him, he transmitted the coordinates for the main reactor core. "This is Rodriguez to all units." His voice crackled through the comm system as his ship's hull began to buckle. "We've got you a way in. Make it count." Thousands of human Marines, supported by alien allies who had learned to fight like humans, poured through the breach. They fought deck by deck through corridors designed by an intelligence that understood physics but not the human capacity for spite. Sergeant Santos, now bearing the scars of a dozen boarding actions, led her squad into the construct's central processing core. The chamber stretched 4 kilometers in all directions, filled with machinery that turned matter into more harvesters with mechanical precision. Jackson set the charges on those main support columns. She ordered, watching as harvester defense constructs began converging on their position. "We're going to bring this whole thing down," Sarge called Private Chun-Nu relation to the Admiral. "Despite the shared name, we're not going to make it out of here." Santos smiled grimly, remembering her drill instructor's words from basic training. "Sometimes the mission is more important than the Marines, son." Today's one of those days. The nuclear charges detonated in sequence, their blast waves racing through the construct's superstructure. But the installation was massive. Designed to withstand stellar forces, the explosions damaged it, but didn't destroy it. That's when Admiral Chen made the decision that would end the war and define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on all frequencies. "I'm ordering a general ramming attack on the central construct. Every ship, every captain ram that thing until it breaks." Admiral Warsinger Vestalan's voice came through the comm. "Surely there must be a more elegant solution." "Elegance is for peacetime," Warsinger Chen cut them off. "Today we fight for survival." The Terran Vengeance led the charge, its massive bulk accelerating toward the construct's primary power core. Around her, hundreds of ships followed human vessels designed for ramming attacks, flying alongside alien craft whose crews had learned to value results over beauty. Chen stood on her bridge as the construct's surface rushed toward them, watching damage reports cascade across her screens. The ship was coming apart around her, but the mission parameters were clear. Destroy the installation, whatever the cost. It's been an honor serving with you all, she said quietly to her bridge crew. The Terran vengeance struck the construct's central reactor with the force of a small asteroid. The explosion that followed lit up the galactic core, visible from thousands of light years away as the installation's exotic matter storage went critical. When the light faded, the harvester threat was over. The construct was gone, its debris scattered across light years of space. The swarm of defender vessels had been caught in the explosion, their controlling intelligence severed forever. The surviving ships of the combined fleet drifted in the aftermath, their crews stunned by the victory they'd purchased with blood and sacrifice. Warsinger Vestalan, commanding one of the few remaining Concordat vessels, opened a channel to the scattered human survivors. Commodore Hayes, they said, addressing the senior surviving human officer, the Concordat Council wishes to extend an formal request. Commander Hayes, now promoted to fill the gaps left by humanity's losses, responded from the bridge of the damaged destroyer Retribution. What kind of request, Warsinger? We would like humanity to establish military academies. Throughout Concordat space, we have learned that there is great wisdom in what we once called barbarism. Hayes looked around at her battered bridge crew men and women who had learned to fight wars that weren't pretty, weren't elegant, and weren't civilized. They had saved the galaxy by refusing to fight like civilized beings. We'll consider the request, Warsinger, she replied, but you should understand something about human military doctrine. We don't fight fair, we don't fight pretty, and we don't fight by anyone else's rules. If that's what you want to learn, we can teach you. But once you've learned to fight like humans, there's no going back to your old ways. After what we have witnessed, Vestalan replied, I do not believe any of us would wish to. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's crude warships and barbaric tactics. But when civilization itself was threatened, crude and barbaric had been exactly what was needed. In the end, the galaxy learned that sometimes the only way to preserve civilized values was to be willing to fight without them, and in that lesson, humanity found its place among the stars, not as the galaxy's most elegant warriors, but as its most effective ones.